Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the fourth session of the security stream in the GSE Virtual Conference. So our fourth session of the day is Al from Maintegrity, and he's also going to be joined by his co-host Gary at some point through his session. The, uh, the the title of the session is "Freeze Attackers in Their Tracks: How Instantaneous Detection and Suspend Resume Revolutionize Cyber Resiliency." Um, we're going to keep the audience muted throughout the session, so if you have any questions, please put them in the chat, and myself or Sue will field them to Al or Gary. And with that, Al, over to you.
Thanks. Thanks very much, David, and thank you very much, Sue. I'm hopeful that this morning's session will be quite informative. One of the things that we've been looking at for some time now is in the whole mainframe security area is the gaps that are to allow insiders to take advantage of a ZOS system. And it's not commonly seen. It's commonly seen as a very secure system, but I think it's important to focus on how we can make it more secure, how this reflects in the real world. So hopefully you get a little bit out of that, out of the presentation this morning. I've been in the mainframe business for now over 50 years, and I still find it very exciting and evolving even more rapidly now. So I think you'll see some things that are very new in this presentation, and hopefully it gives us a very good view of what the environment's like. I'm joined this morning from Maintegrity as well by a very long-term colleague of mine, Gary Euler. Gary will be involved in any of the technical questions and certainly some of the discussion as we go on. So with no further ado, I will get started on our session. So this is a story about a lifetime of work and really a strong current in the environment where we have to focus. And we have to focus on making the mainframe even more secure than it is today. So we're talking about things that will improve the environment and a new way of looking at things. We're basically going to go through, our mainframe's really at risk. Do we need better security? Or is it just fine the way it is? We'll go through that. We'll talk about new sources, new threats. We'll talk about consequences. We'll talk about DORA and NIST towards the end of my presentation. But I really want you to think about, as a result of this session and as a result of what you will know at the end, are you going to do anything different than you are doing today? If you decide you need to go away and look at some things, then that's what this presentation was about. If you decide the mainframe is perfectly secure the way it is, and why would I do anything? Then I think I've failed in my objective, because I want to position what we can do and I think what we must do in order to protect our way of life, which still depends on mainframes. With that, I'm going to try and run a little video, and we'll see what the new world looks like in a very short period of time. About 90 seconds.
The changing world of mainframe security.
In the not-so-distant past, mainframes were the heart of secure computing. Isolated networks and strict access controls kept them safe, offering a sense of impregnable security. But the threat landscape has drastically evolved. We used to imagine hackers as lone wolves operating out of a basement. Today, we face organized crime syndicates and rogue nation-states with vast resources and sophisticated capabilities. In 2012, a hacker exploited zero-day vulnerabilities on a bank's mainframe to exfiltrate a large amount of crucial data. Just imagine the devastation a well-funded and determined group could cause in today's complex cyber landscape. In addition, ransomware as a service and weaponized artificial intelligence have made launching cyber attacks much easier. Let's be clear. Mainframes still boast robust security measures. However, even the most secure systems have vulnerabilities. Stolen credentials, human error, disgruntled employees, and unforeseen zero-day attacks can bypass traditional defenses. With mainframes more connected than ever, they are exposed to immense risk.
Now, I want to talk about that little video just for a second. The point is, there are new attack vectors. But I also want to make the point that in this presentation, my name is Al Surratt, remember. So when you see capital AL, that's me. And when you see capital AI, that's artificial intelligence. The voice that you just heard was created by ChatGPT. The video research, the underlying research was created or was assisted by ChatGPT. It's the research assistant you always wanted because it goes out and examines everything, that every piece of available information, and can bring you back a combined story. So we're going to see some things that are revealed here that are different than what we've been able to see before, because in order to drill down into each one of these attacks that we go into, it's a lot of work. But at the end of the day, the risk to mainframes, that AI and connectivity, connecting to everything, that's a real risk that didn't exist 50 years ago, didn't exist 30 years ago, but exists today. There's a changing role for mainframes. For decades, the mainframe was dead. Security by obscurity was what we called it. Why would anybody bother attacking a mainframe? They'll all be replaced pretty soon anyway. They were unconnected. They were totally unimportant, even though our Western way of life always depended on them and still does. They were seen to be expensive because the bill came all together on one invoice. And they seemed to be complicated because the user interfaces on everything else was simpler to deal with. But that's no longer the case. Now it's connected to everything, or soon will be. And we'll talk about that in a minute too. And there are other threats. AI. Have a look at this. I wrote a little note and I said, good old chat, would you write me an assembler function for the IBM Series Z processor that will do an encryption? Well, encryption can be defensive or it can be offensive. It's really useful when I'm trying to protect my data from being exfiltrated, but it can be a problem in many other respects if it's used to encrypt something and someone else has the key. The only difference between defensive encryption, which is a good thing, and offensive encryption is who has the key. By asking this question, I get this lovely response. Certainly, I can provide you a high-level example. The code that you see on the right-hand side of the screen is almost correct. With a very slight change, it would be correct. And that would run on any z/OS processor completely unreported as a simple batch job or any other way invoked from TSO or however you want to do it. It requires no special authority. It can run at immense speed because of all the crypto cards and all the hardware that's dedicated to fast encryption these days on mainframes. In minutes, it would close down your entire mainframe operation. Because I can get this information from AI, I don't even need to know anything about the mainframe. If I can figure out how to get a job card filled out, I'm pretty much done. So this is a huge risk to me. I think this is something that just has to be dealt with. And we'll show you some options for doing that. But you know, the elephant in the room is always, mainframes are pretty secure, aren't they? Like, why do we really have to worry about that? In a minute, I'm going to go over the most common threat vectors that we're aware of in a modern ransomware attack on mainframes and to some extent on other platforms. But first, let's really talk about whether mainframes get attacked. Isn't it nice that we only have 3 attacks on the mainframe that everybody knows about? The one at Nordea Bank was an external hacker. Barclays was an insider with the assistance of an external gang. Standard Bank in South Africa was again an insider kind of attack. So, you know, 3 attacks in 20 years, maybe we're not that worried about that. But actually, once you dig into this a little bit more, you actually find out that the attacks typically take place on a web server, on an open systems box that's there for, you know, maybe your a support group or maybe some file transfers that happen from outside. Those are the targets. So oddly enough, we don't really think about that in anything other than, man, that was an open systems attack. Isn't that too bad? Well, when you get right into this, it turns out that the attack point can certainly be in the network, but the damage occurs where? In your system of record, in the place where most of the data is stored, and all of the big press is about the millions of records that have been breached in any number of environments. So my assistant, my AI assistant, dear old ChatGPT, I said to it, how about you go out and find me the cases where there was a huge impact, and then tell me if there was a mainframe involved. I don't want to know where the attack took place. I want to know where the damage took place, because where the damage takes place is where the consequence of the breach hit. So in the case of, let's go back to 2014, the US Office of Personnel Management, 22 million high security personnel records were revealed. The speculation is there's Chinese hackers. Can you imagine what that kind of information was worth? Can you imagine where 22 million records came from? This was seen to be an attack in the network. It was not seen to be an attack on ZOS. But once I'm network connected to ZOS, I'm inside. So my attack vector is completely different. And if I siphon off 22 million records, then who's going to be held responsible for that? The people that support the network environment, or the people that were unable to determine that there was a problem in their own mainframe operating environment such that 22 million records escaped. Anthem, the largest HIPAA fine of all time. Everybody kind of goes, wow, $16 million, big HIPAA fine. We're going to talk about this one a little bit in a minute. But my speculation is that the real cost to Anthem is now close to $1 billion. 78 million health records escaped during that process. Where do you think 78 million health records were? And how do you think they escaped? Well, we're going to go into that a little bit more, but they came off the mainframe. Equifax, 147 million records. Desjardins Canada, only 3 years ago, 4.2 million records. Australia, 9.7 million records. ICBC, 6 months ago, an attack on a VPN, because that system was taken off the air, because US Treasuries could not be traded at a point in time, the entire balance of that market was $9 billion offside. And that required very extensive reaction in order to rationalize that in the short term. And we were trading trillions of dollars a day in US Treasuries on a dongle or a key that was brought across from an open systems environment to an open systems environment, because the way ICBC was trading was unavailable. You think about that as a repercussion. United Healthcare, that's still ongoing. We don't know how big the costs are going to be in United Healthcare, but they will be immense. And they're already nearly approaching, from their most recent quarterly reports, they're already approaching nearly $1 billion. And 50% of the invoices in the United States for services of pharmacies, doctors, hospitals could not be transacted for multiple days. I think it was 5 or 6 days, and then they limped back into production. These are real problems, and the mainframe is implicated in every one. So I asked Chat API if there were others, and they gave me another top 10 where the mainframe was the point of damage, was the one that wasn't attacked, but did puke up all of the records that were necessary for that to be a successful attack and a ransom. There are many others, and there are many lessons to be learned from open systems. But the mainframe is not 100% secure. Let's just look at Anthem for a minute. What were the consequences? So where does the damage take place? That kind of tells you who gets sued and where the fines are applied. I've changed this to be health code, to be a little less focused, because I think it's more general in nature. But there was backdoors installed. There was lack of vigilance on behalf of the customer. Those were the allegations. They were settled in 2020. So the settlement, let's get this straight. The breach occurred in 2014. The settlement was in 2020. The costs continue to go up. They continue to be to get greater. But my editorial on this is there were $179 million in direct settlements. That kind of makes the $16 million fine pale, doesn't it? There was class action litigation by 43 state attorney generals that ran for 5 years. 5 years. So imagine this. Your legal folks that are defending good old Anthem, or anybody else sitting in the audience here, they visit you every day because they get some new lame brain question out of some attorney at some state environment asking something or other. They come into your office again every day and ask you and look you straight in the eye and say, how did you manage to screw this up this badly? Well, I think most of us are at risk of being on the other side of that inquisition. The cost of the legal fees, the cost of security consultants, the reputation reputational damage so large that the company changed its name. So it's no longer called Anthem or Healthco in this particular case. Try to imagine that. You change the name of the company. Now you have to write new contracts with all your customers, 78 million of them at least. And you have to reprint everything. And you have to announce it. And you have to pay for that. That's why I say I think the costs in this case are more like $1 billion. Let's look at United Healthcare. We don't have to, United Health, we don't really have to dig too deep into this, but we know, chat, here's my notice from chat. Yes, United Healthcare utilizes mainframe technology specifically within their healthcare operations. They were off the air for 5 days. Oh, wow. I wonder if the mainframe was affected. Well, if the mainframe wasn't affected, they would have been able to have some kind of service. Because you can imagine that most of those invoice payments are the same as they've always been, and that's where they're flowing through. So even though this was, really well written up and an attack via a known failure, and multiple entities were involved, including Black Cat and Ransom Hub and all the rest, that data came from the mainframe. Okay, so let's talk about this a little bit. Let's talk about our world. Conventional security, RACF, TSS, ACF2, firewalls, access control. Keep the bad guys out and let the good guys in to do their work, right? Nothing new under the sun. Not quite. These criminals now are organized. They're patient. They steal credentials. They can use different forms of extortion on different people to get access. So access control is part of the answer, and MFA, multi-factor authentication, certainly helps. But if all you do is guard your perimeter, you have a major problem. Not only can phishing campaigns and attacks from the outside work, rogue staff that you trust, that have been at the company perhaps for years, suddenly go rogue. Typically, it's associated with addiction, some sort of a health problem, some sort of a financial meltdown on the personal side. But they already have everything they need to attack. Typically, the biggest concern is a gambling addiction. But we have also legitimate work going on and changes in error. And you need to be able to intercept those as well. But here's the real risk. In the brave new world, we are creating new connections to open systems environments like there's no tomorrow. But those open systems also talk to the web. And the web also talks to bad guys. So the bad guys can very easily, with their skill set, attack an open systems or Apache web server and look for patches that aren't applied. Very simple process. Then they move laterally into the mainframe environment, but they may not even recognize they are there in terms of siphoning data off. But just to go back and use the AI example, they can run an encryption program. And the first record that you will have of that encryption program running is when your mainframe is dead in the water. But don't worry, that encryption job that was run would probably end with a condition code 0 and say it had just encrypted everything in the mainframe. That will happen so quickly that you need to react. You need to prevent the problem before it occurs. Any reaction that includes a human being is already too late. That wasn't enough. everybody must have heard now that open source is the way to make mainframes more responsive. Open source is a roadmap for anybody that wants to attack, because they embed a new piece of code in there or gain access to something. That's an ongoing problem. So that's not going away, but it is becoming a bigger issue all the time. So I want to talk a little bit. We're going to go into a variety of things here, but we're going to talk about how to prevent ransomware at the conceptual level. We're going to talk about how to eliminate human response time. Let me get this straight. Human response time. We are going to eliminate as much as we possibly can so that a human being can respond and take the right response in a few seconds. That allows us to avoid data theft. But other indicators, other information like, is there a new IP address that has never connected to this application before? Is this new on our system? Those all become questions that you have to be able to answer, and situations that you have to be able to identify to prevent this problem from running rampant. So I'm going to quit beating up on the problem. It's just that it's probably career-ending for most folks involved, and where the damage occurs is on the mainframe. So the biggest problem will occur not in open systems where they didn't put the patch on. It will occur in mainframe staffing where it's obvious that they could have prevented data exfiltration or encryption of critical things. So that's a big problem. But as we all know, in the mainframe space, so is the skill shortage. You know, we're not full of people with 50 years of experience anymore, or 40 or 30 or 20. We are turning this over to people that don't understand, don't have the same level of intimacy with ZOS as many of us on this call. So we have to address the skill shortage as well. There's lots of other things that need to happen here, but you have to think about these two things. There are, as security is set up in ZOS today, RACF or ACF2 or TSS or whatever you want is protecting the outside. But what happens when they get inside? So there is a problem with the hardware solutions that are in place. There are problems with the software solutions that are in place because they're not complete. But there's also a gap in human reaction. If you simply fix the software and the hardware, you still have the human reaction to deal with. And that cries for an end-to-end security process. Okay, let's look at a ransomware attack. This is standard stuff. You've even seen this from me before. So a typical ransomware attack is I embed some malware, and it could be a backdoor to give me control. It could be a time bomb. I could go in and compromise backups. I could encrypt a key database. I could exfiltrate data. Any of those put the ransomers in a control position. So we need to be sure that all of those loopholes can be closed. So that's what we're going to focus on today. What typically happens is, as a ransomer, I'm now in a business. What do I want to do? I want to get in quickly. I want to compromise something that's of value. I want to send a ransom note. I want to get paid, and I want to move on and do the same thing again. That's what all these ransomware as a service guys are. They're involved in finding independent attack hackers. That's where they make their money. So I just want to get in and get out quick and get paid. Current practice. Let's talk about encryption as an example. So I'm going to go through the encryption example, and then I'm going to really turn things over to a few different questions that have come in. But encryption tasks simply run on ZOS. That's current practice today. It's encryption. Who cares? Just a batch job or just a TSO session. No big deal. It can be desirable or malicious. So you have to be able to determine the difference between desirable and malicious. It can affect multiple databases. It can affect millions of records almost instantaneously. It is not connected. It is not detected with current ZOS tool set, and it requires no special authority. I don't even need to be authorized to run an encryption job. So what do we need to do? Well, first of all, at the second that things get started, I need to identify that there is an encryption task active. Well, that could be an application job that's looking after their application files, and that's a defensive encryption. So I need to determine whether it is desired or not desired. But the first thing I need to do is I need to understand there's an encryption task running. A way to do this is by building an approved list. And you can just capture that from normal operation and say, oh, here's all. If I could detect encryption, I can just say, oh, here's all the tasks that are normally running encryption. They're fine. Put them on a whitelist. Done. But if it isn't on the whitelist, then I have to take different action. So if it's not on the whitelist, I become highly suspect that this is a rogue activity. If not approved, then we're going to intercept that. We need to intercept that task, and we need to suspend that activity right now. So if I can detect an encryption in the first second of operation, and I then suspend the task, I've done two things. I've stopped the damage from occurring, and I've also suspended time. So since the damage is no longer occurring, now the support team can react. So if I just send a real-time alert to the support team, they'll know they need to do something. And if I suspend that in the exact right way, I can affect that bad offside task and freeze it while everything else continues to process just like normal. Well, when I investigate in the support group, I might find out, oh man, that's a new application task and they never told me about it. And, it's going to run every week or two. And so I actually simply want to resume that task. Well, if you orchestrate this correctly, with a click of a button, you can say the support group, anybody that's authorized to resume a task can simply resume the task and it continues and finishes like normal. But if that's not the case, if we can't verify that that is an encryption task that is desirable, then we have no other option but to say it's an unknown task. I'm going to cancel this. My system, if it's well integrated, should create a trouble ticket for me. I should initiate the anti-malware recovery process necessary to get my system components back to an uncompromised state. Because if I just go away and get the data back, but I don't correct how it got contaminated in the first place, well, it'll just get compromised again. So I have to automate the data recovery, but I have to ensure that the system has been returned to an anti-malware state. In the open system world, they just say, oh, but I'll go ahead and buy a whole bunch of new servers and put new version, fresh version of the operating system on, and change all, reset them up in order to run your business. Well, it doesn't work that well in the open systems world, but it doesn't work at all in the mainframe world. So we got to go back and take the malware off. But by just intercepting this at an early point in time, we've reduced the damage by orders of magnitude. So what have we done about ransom attack? Well, actually, we've done a whole lot. If you can intercept a weaponized encrypt, then you're not going to have to worry about your databases being encrypted. If you can detect malware when it enters the system, you're not going to have to worry about time bombs and backdoors and malware embedding. If you can suspend and resume things, you don't have to worry about the human reaction time because it's going to be virtually instantaneous. If you can identify suspicious user behavior, you're going to get indicators of compromise ahead of the attack, so you can prevent it rather than recover from it. However, if something slips through and you have to recover, you need to be able to do surgical system recovery. You need to stop data exfiltration, and you need to be able to recover the data from a very current source. And often enough, that means immutable backups in today's modern environment. And that means you can eliminate a ransom payment. Now, I'm going to take a break. I'm going to ask David if there are any questions that we want to cover at this point. The rest of my presentation is around DORA and NIST cybersecurity framework. But I'll just take a little breath here, and maybe I see there's a few things in the chat box. David, if you would be good enough to read those for me, Gary or I can respond, and we'll talk about DORA following.
Yeah, no, sure, Alp. So no questions actually. All in regard to, there's just been a bit of a mix-up with the slides that have been uploaded to your session, but I'll email you after the session to get that sorted. So double check. No questions for now. So you're good to continue.
Okay. So I'll go into DORA here, but before I leave the threat environment, I really want you to think hard about whether your senior management doesn't think mainframes are, I'm not having that many problems with the mainframe today. So, I don't want to spend any money on it. Don't want to bring any new people in. I mean, just keep it running. Just, maybe it'll just stay quiet. Maybe it won't happen to us. I wonder what the United Health folks are thinking about right now. I wish I'd taken some preventative action. I wish we weren't out for 5 days. I wish I had had an end-to-end cybersecurity framework put in place so that I could react quickly. I wish I wish I wasn't the victim now of so many comments about so many things that either were done or were not done historically that ruined my reputation, the years I've worked to try and make things right. That's, I'm afraid, where your senior management sits. And unless we change that perspective, they will never spend a penny on trying to improve security, because there's this perception that we kind of buy into that the security on the mainframe is okay. Well, it's not. It's not okay because that's where all, well, not all, but a very large percentage of the really major breaches, that's where the rubber meets the road. You know as well as I do, you don't have mainframe systems unless they're doing heavy duty data processing that's been done that way for 20 years or 40 years or whatever, but contains the keys to the entire operation. It can't, most companies cannot run without their mainframes. They can run without the web for a while, and it's a big inconvenience. But if the mainframe is down or critically compromised, that's a much bigger problem. So we bear the responsibility for our way of life. And I think you should think about that hard. So let's go on to DORA, because I think that's what they were thinking about. In Europe, and not so much the UK and not so much in the USA, there are new standards. And DORA is about enforcement. DORA is about proving that things are working as expected, that you can recover from a cyber event. We're not talking about it moving to a different disaster recovery site. We're talking about keeping your systems up and running and not having your data stolen. The requirements for DORA have good cybersecurity. They talk about identify, protect, detect, recover, respond, and recover. The same 5 pillars that are in the NIST CSF cybersecurity framework and have been there for a long time. So that covers, NIST covers the US, DORA covers Europe. Almost everybody is going to implement some version of DORA where there is financial accountability for testing, and there's pen testing required on a very regular basis. We consider the NIST cybersecurity framework to be very complete. It is used and has been repurposed in most countries in order to make that, to highlight what needs to be done. DORA just puts some teeth in that. They talk about a 2-hour on-air recovery window. In the mainframe, I don't care who you are, and if you are a dreamer, you imagine that you can get attack shut down and back on the air in 2 hours, I would say good luck. The only way you can recover in a 2-hour window is not to recover at all, but rather to prevent the problem before it occurs. So your best recovery is no recovery. On the other hand, you also have to have recovery capabilities in place in case something slips through. Resiliency plans must exist and be tested regularly. That's all part of the DORA requirements. And there are criminal charges possible in this environment. You'd probably have to screw up pretty badly to go to jail. It's not probably the way you want to think about your retirement. So here's a little look at DORA and NIST cybersecurity framework requirements. So identify, of course, you need the kinds of things that RACF and TSS and all of the other enterprise security products give you. That gives you identify. Keep the bad guys out. Keep them outside as long as you can. You have to have that. You have to have access control. So protection is ultra important. Make sure the people know what to do. Make sure your data protection is rigorous. If something goes wrong, you have to be able to detect it. So you got to be looking for anomalies, and you have to be reacting to events. The response is also important. They don't say here, it has to be quick, but it had better be quick, because otherwise making your mind up can be a long-term situation. In the Equifax case, they said they put people together for 6 weeks to decide what to do. That's not quick response. And then recovery. Do you have the assets to recover? Do you have immutable backups? Do you have a way of determining which system components were compromised and restoring only the compromised ones? To what date, you might ask? Oh, just before they were compromised would be the best. But how do you know that? Those are all questions that need to be answered. So in our environment, we think there are 2 pieces of this that are really important. And that is, you need to look at all of the additional things down here that can be automated with current software solutions. File integrity monitoring, been available on Windows for years. Get it for your mainframe. It gives you a lot of information about malware. The ability to detect new IP addresses connecting. Get it, because that allows you to stop data exfiltration in a short period of time. The entire requirement to respond cries for suspension and resumption. Go get a product that gives you the ability to do that. Recovery. Get capability to remove malware. Get capability to look at what's in an immutable backup. An immutable backup isn't that easy to recover from. So understand what that process looks like. Have the right software in place to be able to do a data set level recovery. Those products in this lower level, those products exist. And if you do not have an answer in these spaces, you have a problem waiting to occur. But first, you're going to need to convince management it's worth doing anything. And there I take you back to the consequences of doing nothing. And they are immense, and they can be $1 billion. But you know, that's just money. What if it's a water company? What if it's a power company? What if it's truly in healthcare and running a hospital? Now we're talking about issues that are life and death. You need to think about that hard. But if you're in a bank or you're in the financial industry, you need to think about the collapse of the financial ability to interact. And in 2008, we were very close to that when some of the banks failed. But a cyber hit to a too big to fail bank is the same sort of problem. It's the end of our financial trading capability in a matter of a few hours, or backed up so badly that it would take 6 months to sort out. The other piece that is desperately important here, these are all technological fixes in the bottom. In the top is something a little more of an issue as well. And that's, what do we do about the gaps in the people involved? Oh, well, we could just make them work 24 hours a day. And we could say, oh, well, we don't have time to do any training. And we could say, you need to be ultra vigilant all the time. And when something goes wrong, you need to know all of the response protocols, and you need to know all of the recovery steps so that you can get back on the air really quickly. The other option is to have an end-to-end process and solution that's tied together. No one vendor has all the software required to do this. Nobody. So you have to have a multi-vendor solution, an architecture where you can plug things in. In the current world, we need to think about how our open systems guys that are going to be the next support group going to interact with this. Well, GUI-based or browser-based solutions are about the only thing that you can do. But that whole software solution, software layer that you need to put in prevents people problems from impacting your ability to recover. But it needs to be holistic. It needs to embrace everything from identify to recover. And it needs to step you through that in an organized manner, probably using AI to answer questions as you're going along when they come up. There should be a slick interface to that. We should make that simple to operate, but not 100% automatic. Keep that under the control of the response team. So the supporters need certain breakpoints to say, are we going to go to the next step? But we need automation to say the next step is, and we would recover these, and those kinds of processes. What are the next things to do to resolve the problem? Okay, so my last real big slide here is what do we do to close off? These are the things that you'll have to do. I think I've been through each one of them, but I want you to think hard about this bottom line. Demand that your vendors all work together in an integrated manner. That doesn't happen easily, and it doesn't happen today, but it can happen. And it's the responsibility of customers to make it happen, to make their vendors bring this forward. It hasn't been available on z/OS before. It is now. So I'll close with this, and then we'll see if we got questions or not. If you want to think about the consequences and do nothing, that's an option. If you would rather fix the problems, we're doing a lunch and learn session on how the best of these processes have been integrated together in a cybersecurity framework that maps directly to DORA and maps directly to the NIST cybersecurity framework. So if you want to do that, join me tomorrow for a session, for a lunch and learn session, and I'll show you more about how you can fight back and how this is going to work. Or you can visit our website. You'll see lots on the attack vectors. As I told David, the slides have already been uploaded in a PDF format. If you need us to do to talk to your management to make that the problems and the issues and the solutions more apparent, we're happy to work with you to do that. So my job here is to make the mainframe and the platform as a whole both more secure and more successful. And that's what I work on every day. So with that, I'll close things off. And David, if you have any questions, we can answer them now. Otherwise, I will ask you to fill out your evaluation forms. I think there's brand new content in there. I think you should thank dear old ChatGPT for doing much of my research in this area and helping me to provide the background on both attack vectors and the consequences thereof. So if you would fill out 8E. I don't know that I have seen this kind of information come from other folks before. So hopefully it's been enlightening. Hopefully it's been actionable. Hopefully we'll have a chance to talk. But David, if you have any questions, happy to answer them at this point.
Thanks, Al, for a great session. So there's no questions in the chat, but I have invited everybody to come off mute if anybody would like to ask a question. Okay, if there's no questions, Al, we'll close the session. Just like encourage everybody, please, to provide feedback using the link on the screen. And thanks very much, Al, for a great session.
David, because of the lack of questions, I'm a little unsure whether I raised more questions than I gave solutions for. But I would totally say, if you think this is thought provoking, a good time to ask questions would be at this session tomorrow. But thank you for your time. Thank you for your interest. I think if we work together, we'll be able to make the mainframe a better environment yet. Thank you, David, and thank you, Sue.
Thanks, Al, and thanks everyone for attending.